Star Wars fans, Grand Admiral Thrawn has officially entered the chat. Today we're breaking down episode 6 of Ahsoka. What's Balin's real plan, and did that Ezra Sabine reunion work? We're going to get into that and more on the Story Geeks show. We have an excellent panel to discuss this with us today. Of course, I'm just going to go around the circle here. So the first one up is Mr. OG55, the Grand Admiral of OG55's network. How you doing, OG?
I am doing fantastic. I'm really excited to talk episode 6 with you fellas today. There's a lot going on in this one. Like you said, Admiral Thrawn has entered the chat, so that's kind of fascinating. But you can find me here on Orange Grove 55 on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter at Orange Grove 55, and you can also find me now on Instagram, Orange Grove 55.
Nice. And then I think this is the Story Geek show first. A man who's brave enough to wear a Star Trek shirt to a Star Wars show. Slimer's with us today. How you doing, Slimer?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. I'm ready to talk about this episode. There's a lot to cover. I do like Star Trek and Star Wars, and very often I wear opposing shirts to the conversations about the topics. So
yeah, might as well rile up the opposite fandom. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here for it. It's perfect. And then, of course, we have Citrus George with us today. How you doing, George?
I'm doing good. Glad to be back on talking episode 6 with you fellas. And for everyone out there who would like to watch me, follow me, or whatever, you could do so on X at Disney George. You could also check out the podcast I'm part of called A Walk with Walt. And, of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's good to have you guys with me, and we're going to talk all about episode 6. Let's just go around and say what we thought of this episode. What was your scale of 1 to 10 rating, and did you like this one? How did it compare to the other episodes we've seen thus far? OG, I'll start with you.
Okay, so I actually really liked this episode quite a bit, actually. I'd probably give it like about an 8, I think. Okay. I thought it was really well done. Overall, I thought, look, I loved it. My biggest complaint, and this, I feel really shallow for saying this, but I mean, I guess got to be honest. I loved Thrawn's entrance into live action, right? I thought that was dope. I'm really glad they brought him into this live action whole thing. My only issue with him was the dad bod. And I saw a lot of complaints about that on Twitter and stuff. And I'm like, oh, people are being kind of ridiculous. But then when I watched it, I'm like, yeah, it kind of is a little bit of a thing. Because, like, you know, Thrawn is very lean. I don't know. It was a little bit distracting. Now the acting and everything was like, oh, chef's kiss, perfect. I mean, the character was like the acting and all that was fantastic. I do think that he was a little chunky for the role.
So is that just because you think that Grand Admiral Thrawn would be like so put together that he wouldn't let himself get there? Is that kind of the thought process?
Right. Absolutely. You feel like, yeah, he's a put together guy. I picture like, oh man, who's that guy that was in The Last Jedi? He was the British guy. I totally forgot his name, man. But it'll come to me.
Jedi? Which one is it?
I mean, not The Last Jedi. I'm sorry, Rise of Skywalker. He was only in Rise of Skywalker, the British guy, older gentleman. He was in the First Order. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I forgot his name, but that's kind of how that's kind of how I picture like Thrawn, kind of skinny, that kind of English accent, right? I don't know. This one didn't really work for me visually, but I thought the acting was fantastic. I think like he portrayed the character really well. But we're just so used to visually a different Thrawn, and you know, that was the only thing. Other than that, I mean, look, the music in this show has been absolutely off the rails good, especially that like with the Sabine, and we'll get to the Sabine and Ezra, but the Sabine and Ezra scene where they meet for the first time, the music was like, oh my god, it was like Lord of the Rings, like it is swelled up, and I love that. So there was a lot of good in this episode. Petty complaint about Thrawn's appearance, but it didn't ruin it for me. I still give it an 8.
I can see where you're coming from. I think like another person, another Brit actually, but I think another person you could say was probably very Thrawn-like would be somebody like Benedict Cumberbatch, who's
Yes.
like
Yes.
taller
Yes.
than other people, and
Yes.
he's like slim, and you portray that. I kind of see that. Now, I will say this: I have only read about Thrawn in the books because I read the Timothy Zahn trilogy back in the day, and I also read I believe it's just called Thrawn, the Thrawn novel. It's newer. I don't remember who wrote that one. But I have not seen Thrawn in Rebels yet. I'm still behind on Rebels. I did watch the World Between Worlds episode just to get my head around that. That didn't distract me as much, but I can totally understand your complaint, especially since you've seen Rebels, right? So it's like you have something to compare it to. I don't yet, so it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and the actor that I couldn't figure the name out is Richard E. Grant, is the gentleman from the Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, yeah, okay. And now I know who you're talking about, Richard. Yeah, okay.
I think he would have been phenomenal in this role. But again, the gentleman who did it, Mikkelsen, he was fantastic.
Yeah.
What was his name? I'm sorry.
Lars Mikkelsen.
Lars Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Brother of Mads Mikkelsen.
Right. Exactly.
I was calling him a Skarsgård the other day just because I'm like, there's too many brothers that are from that region of the world doing stuff. But they're all good too. They're all amazing. So I'm like, I don't know which one of those guys. Slimer, what did you think? What did you think of this episode?
It's really setting up Act 3 really nicely. There, Dave Filoni's taking his time. He's putting all the pieces together. He wants to make sure that all the characters are in place. The motives are very clear. He wants to. I'm not going to say. I might wait to say this a little bit later.
Okay.
But I think Dave Filoni's playing the long game here. I don't think that we're going to get the ending we want. I think that we're going to get an ending that's going to leave it open to possibilities that may be reaching out to episodes 10, 11. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he did very well with longhand storytelling in the Clone Wars, and I think that we can't underestimate him. So I'll give it a solid 8 out of 10. I didn't enjoy it as much as the episode before, simply because Anakin Skywalker automatically puts it at least a 9. But I really enjoyed it. A lot of John Williams, George Lucas feels in this episode.
Yes,
and I think you guys agree with that. So.
Yeah, the music, and I should have looked it up before we got on. We started recording, but the music, whoever is scoring this show, is just hitting a home run. It's absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, the guy's name is Kleiner. His last name is Kleiner, I believe. Kleiner, and he's on Twitter. You can follow him on Twitter. He's done a bunch of stuff. He's done a bunch of stuff in Hollywood. First time I think he's worked on Star Wars. I think, but yeah, he's really killing it. So we got 2 8 out of 10s. George, what are you going to do here? You going to go higher or lower than 8 out of 10?
Okay, so I'm actually going to still keep it at a level playing field. But I guess, I don't know. Since we are talking Star Wars, I guess I should be taking the high ground. But
yeah.
Absolutely. But there you go. But I'm going to give it an 8 as well for the episode itself. Now, here's where I'm going to kind of go off the rails here a little bit.
Okay.
As an Ahsoka,
balls to the wall, would you say? Are we going balls to the wall or just
balls
off
to the wall?
Okay,
let's go. We'll go balls to the wall.
Okay.
Why not? As far as an Ahsoka episode, I have to give it an. God, you guys are probably going to think I'm nuts. I'm going to give it a 4.
What?
Because here's why. Because as an episode itself, it's a phenomenal episode. But throughout the whole series, it seems like this is about anything really but Ahsoka. Aside from it actually tying into with Anakin and like where her path may lead, but it just seems like everybody else's story is being fleshed out except for hers. And that's what's a little bit frustrating to me because now if it was something where it was, a Sabine and Ezra show, where it kind of, they're separate, where maybe they could do like a show where, Sabine is, in one part and then it kind of transitions to Ezra and then it fuses together. But it seems like every episode I'm watching, I'm still not getting a fleshed out direction as where it's going for Ahsoka. As far as the storyline goes, I think it's a strong storyline that's going to lead to, as what Slimer mentioned, for the third act. But I don't. But maybe that is Filoni's mindset, that maybe he doesn't want it to end on the part where it's like, okay, we get all the secrets revealed of like what it is for Ahsoka. I do, however, feel like I'm actually going to go one step further. I don't think that it's going to go into like an episode 10, 11, 12. I'm going to actually go a little bit higher. I'm thinking this is actually going to raise some stakes for a theatrical film. And
well, I think that's what you meant, right, Slimer? Episode 10. Did you mean like another sequel trilogy when you said episode?
Or did you mean actually episodes?
No. So I agree with you, George, and OG, I agree with you. I think that this is going to lead to an Heir to the Empire film, but the antagonist that they're setting up, and there's a couple YouTube channels, so this isn't an original idea. I'm not saying this is, you've heard it here first, folks, but I think that with regard to the power that Baylan is seeking, I have two theories, and Jay, I'll wait until you pose the question, but I think it is going to lead to an Heir to the Empire film, which is going to star the unification of Ahsoka, Ezra, Luke Skywalker. I think you are going to see a formidable Jedi alliance between those characters, but I think they're going to do the Thanos move, and I think that we're going to see them. That villain is not going to be defeated in that movie, and is going to carry over into an antagonist that Rey is going to have to battle much further down the line.
That's
interesting.
Fascinating.
Ooh, I like this. This is we're teasing in the rest of the show a little bit here. I like this.
Right.
Yeah.
But as far as the rest of the episode goes, as you guys mentioned, the score was phenomenal. When Thrawn came out, that music, everything that builds up, it almost kind of gives you that sense of like where you can't take your eyes away. It kind of gives you that Vader feel. Like when Vader is in the room, you get that music, it's that presence, it has your attention. And then you see the full image of Thrawn, and I'm like, okay, the music was more antagonistic than the actual Thrawn himself, because it's like I would have preferred like an actor like Benedict Cumberbatch, or as you had mentioned, OG Richard Grant, someone that has like that a little bit
like
more
stature.
of the stature, but a little bit also more in the authority and like in their voice, that can, like, because Benedict Cumberbatch did a phenomenal job with his voiceover for Smaug in The Hobbit. So, and that was a dragon, but like when you hear his voice, it was like so clean and so precise that it was like, okay, this thing is evil, but it's like, damn, he sounds good. That's kind of like what I wanted, like from Thrawn. But aside from that, I mean, I think that he's still a great character. The acting is still good. But as an episode itself, I give it an 8. As far as it being an Ahsoka episode, I give it a 4, because I'm not convinced on where the series is leading as far as for Ahsoka goes.
Well, and to Lars's credit with Thrawn, when he talks, I'm like glued to, like, I'm like so attentive. Like the way he talks, he's so soft spoken and so eloquent, right? It just draws you in. So the acting was just like phenomenal. I mean, the physicality of it aside, I thought the way he portrayed Thrawn was damn near flawless. But we'll get into it more. But interesting episode, very interesting episode.
Yeah.
He just got to lay off those morning donuts.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Thrawn is an interesting character because he is essentially playing this complex game of chess where he knows everybody's move 20 moves ahead, right?
Right.
And he knows what everyone could do, and he's already planned for it. And so from that standpoint, I think that Lars just destroys it. Like he does such a good job of Even the way he starts to talk about the threads and who's here and who's not coming and who's not. And this is unfortunate that somebody's coming, but it's not like the end of the world. He doesn't panic. He's just like, well, that's unfortunate. We're going to have to deal with that situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not scared of it. He's just assessing it in his mind, which I think is really interesting.
Well, and even that at the very end when he was talking about Ahsoka, I want to know everything about her history, her culture, her this, her that. That's a very Thrawn thing to do. That you deep diving into like just every element of it, and I love that. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, notice who he aligns himself with. He aligns himself with a group of Force users that can predict the future. Right, so being not only being able to see 2-3 steps ahead, he wants to know the whole line of causality from here to infinitum. Because if he knows that, then he knows what everybody's going to do. He knows what he likes certainty, and he didn't align himself with Sith or Jedi. It was strictly, hey, I need to know what's going to happen from here till infinity, and that's where his power lies. That's where he seeks his power.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give it an 8 as well. I think I might have given it an 8.5 the other day, but I watched it again today and I went, okay, it's about an 8. And most of my problems with this episode we'll get into a little bit later, because there are directing choices that I think take away from some of the key moments. The key moments could have been even more impactful than they were. You guys, several of you guys mentioned the score. The score is better than what we see on screen in terms of eliciting emotion.
That's true.
And I think there were some ways to change that, just slight things. Maybe they ran out of time. I'm sure the person who directed this is way better than me. But, those are the kind of things that you run into. But I think there was a little bit lacking there. Now, one of the first things that I found interesting about this episode was, ever since they told us that there's 2 galaxies, I've been thinking to myself, well, it's always been a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And that's what we heard from Hu Yang in this episode. He's talked about the galaxy far, far away. And what I found really interesting about this was that both the witches on Peridia, I don't know how to pronounce that actually, so that's my best guess.
That's pretty good. That's better than I could have done.
We'll go with that.
Go with that. They knew that Sabine was a Jedi, and they knew that they didn't like Jedi. So apparently the Jedi Order existed in this other galaxy to some extent. And then Baylan talks about that the Jedi would talk about this galaxy even though they thought it was folklore. So if you go back in time far enough, the Jedi and these witches of Dathomir that are on Peridia, like, they knew each other somehow. So what do you think that does to Star Wars lore, Slimer? Like, is that good for Star Wars lore? Is it bad for Star Wars lore? What do you think?
All right, so I had to look this up, okay? And one thing that I learned is Dave Filoni is actually changing the origin of the Night Sisters.
Oh.
So in the Clone Wars, they were originally from Dathomir, which is where Darth Maul is from. But now they're from Peridia. They're from an entirely different galaxy. Now, we know that, we're obviously familiar with the Clone War origins. It's very heavily interconnected with Darth Maul and Savage Opress. And so we've got a good grasp on that. By changing these Night Sisters to another galaxy, though, I think what Dave is trying to establish here is that because they're in a different galaxy, the Force itself, it's a different form. It's a different metaphysics, right? And so the metaphysics of the Force itself are completely different in this realm of the universe. Now, what is the name here? I got it here on my computer, but the Night Witch or the Night Sister that they've been dealing with so far, what's her name? It starts with an E.
Oh yeah, their names were all crazy. I saw them on IMDb earlier today, and I'm like, I don't know how to say those names.
the one that made the super warp ship.
Oh yeah. What is her name? Moraine or something like that? Morgan?
Something like that. I mean, obviously she knows these Night Sisters, and maybe she's communicated with them through the Force in some capacity, and has gave them the heads up about the Jedi and the Sith. But to me, that's really unclear.
Yeah.
I think there are some implications, But with the two different origin stories of the Night Sisters, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Jay?
Well, by the way, it's Morgan Elsbeth. That's where the E is. I'm like,
There it is.
I said Elsbeth. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. There's an E in it. Wait a minute. Just let me get this. All right. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to think of it, because part of me as an old school Star Wars fan is like, why introduce another galaxy, man? Like, you already have so much to play with in this galaxy.
Right.
Why go to another one? I do think you bring up an interesting point, though, in terms of the way that the Force could work in different galaxies might be different. That's really intriguing to me. I also wonder if it has something to do with whether or not this movie will ever come out. Who knows? Because Disney cancels so many movies. In fact, they're saying that the Taika Waititi movie is now not happening. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where this goes. But I do wonder if this has something to do not only with Filoni's movie. We know Filoni's getting a movie, which we're going to talk about that later, I'm sure, as we talk about what happens after this show. But I also wonder if the James Mangold film has something to do with this galaxy. And I say that because Baylan keeps saying, I want to go back to the beginning. And that makes me think, the beginning of what? Like the beginning of the Force, the beginning of the Jedi? Did it all occur here somewhere? And is he going to change the world somehow based on these things? And so I'm wondering if this is setting up not only Filoni's film, but also Mangold's film, because we know that Mangold's film is all going to be all about the beginning of the Force and beginning of the Jedi Order and things like that. So that's my only thought process, but I'm struggling a little bit as an old school Star Wars fan to be like, why do we need to go to another galaxy? George, what do you think about this? Do you think it's two galaxies is a good idea?
No. No, it's I think we can't underestimate Filoni. I think he has bigger plans for these characters. I feel like he has a bigger plan for the storyline, and I and back to what Slimer had mentioned earlier, I feel like that he's setting this up because even to my own comment of saying like I'm still not getting enough of Ahsoka. And it's like we have 2 episodes left. So how are we going to crunch all this into 2 episodes? So I feel like that Filoni's kind of throwing these little Easter eggs in to kind of see if anyone can kind of break it down to say, oh, okay, there's this, there's that, but there's not enough answers for it. But it's going to be telling as we move on and progress with these characters in this storyline, because I feel like that he had more to say even beyond Rebels, so this is where he's kind of like fleshing that out in this live action format. Right. And I think that either with a film or even possibly extending the series or starting up another series that continues on where it may continue a character's journey even beyond Ahsoka, where the possibility of having 2 galaxies would make sense moving into future episodes or another series or a feature film.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me. OG, what do you think?
Okay, so I'm with you, Jay, on this. I think that they're setting up. We've seen a lot of talk from Disney, right, Lucasfilm, about getting away from like the Skywalker thing and sort of setting up like Star Wars. It's Star Wars, but it's like completely anew. It's a whole new kind of version of the franchise. We've seen this a lot, right, with Disney. Well, we haven't seen it, but we've heard about it with rumors of new movies coming out. Like, yes, it's Star Wars, but we're not gonna play in the same timeline, the same galaxy. They're setting something up here. And I think the second galaxy is setting something up for the future, absolutely, with future movies, trilogies, whatever that may be. I think Slimer, you brought up a great point with how the Force might be handled differently. The what did you say? The metaphysics of the Force.
Yeah, the way the Force manifests itself metaphysically might be completely different in this region of the universe.
Yeah, I think they're gonna play with that. I think there's a desire on Disney's end to like, or Lucasfilm to kind of like take Star Wars in a completely new direction. And I think that kind of gives them that opportunity because now you have a whole new galaxy to play with. and you can change the rules a little bit. You can kind of bend things around. You can work with them a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And you're not messing with the the original stuff, so you're not going to piss fans off too much, right? So you're kind of doing in your own galaxy. I think that's what this is all about. I think that's why they did this second galaxy, and I think it works. I mean, look, I'm okay with them expanding this out, right? It would be almost like, in my opinion, imagine if we had the technology as human beings to go to another galaxy, right? And we land on some planet in another galaxy, and you find a Christian cross in the ground on some planet out there. How would that change our world? Like, how would that completely blow everyone's freaking mind, right?
Right.
That's kind of like boom. That's kind of something, right? It would just blow your mind. So I think they're kind of playing with stuff, and I'm excited for it. I think it could work. I think if handled right, I think it could work, and I think if it's done right and fans like it, I think you're right, Jay. I think they're doing like maybe the Mangle thing, maybe other stuff in this new galaxy, and it's a sandbox now that's been kind of untouched. I mean, it's theirs to work with. So,
well, and I'm sorry, just really quick, a comment to that, OG. First off, I actually did have an experience like that once, but I already finished the tequila. So anyway,
there you go, exactly.
But by kind of going off of what you were mentioning about like changing it up a bit, like within the galaxy, and we kind of already see that now, even with the use of the Force itself, because it was supposedly just for within the sanctums of the Jedi. And now it's starting to seem like, okay, well, anyone can kind of use the Force if you have that mindset and that mentality that if you really hone into your own well-being, that you can use the Force. Where now it's kind of going out of the gate of like it has nothing to do with the midichlorians and like being a Jedi and being trained as a Jedi. It's like it's completely taking that to a whole nother level, which I'm kind of okay with if that's the route that they're going with this new storyline, because it's not just keeping it in one pack. That it's like, okay, in order to talk about the Force or relay something with the Force, it has to be about a Jedi. And now it can be about a bounty hunter. It could be about just a normal everyday person on this planet or what have you. That it's like the Force interconnects with everybody in different ways. But as you were going to say, Slimer, sorry about it.
Yeah, no, dude, you're absolutely right. I want to piggyback off of what George just said and what OG just said, Jay, if I can.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Dave Filoni, he's doing two things simultaneously, and he's doing them extremely well. He's doing universe building, but he's also ensuring, and as Robert Burnett says, he's making sure that the characters are in service of the worlds, of the expansion of the universe, and not the opposite way. He's also doing something that the masters do, and that is he's forcing the audience to use their imagination. Here he is. He fictitiously created a fictitious universe and a fictitious universe, and now the entire audience is using the highest level of their imagination to try to come up with ideas surrounding it. Where did this come from? What does this mean? How does this impact the Jedi? I mean, that to me is something that like an auteur would do. And I mean, we got to think, we can't undercut that in any way. You know, I mean, we can't undercut the fact that he said, "Hey, we're going to put a galaxy." And I know, Jay, you're kind of maybe on the fence when it comes to a new galaxy. But there's a lot of creative imagination going on with the Star Wars fans right now regarding how it connects. What does this mean? How does the Force work over there? So he's expanded the universe, but not at the sacrifice of the character building. And I think we should give let's give Filoni a little bit of credit with that, because it's a very difficult thing to do. Usually one is always in the service of the other, but we haven't lost character development, and the motivations so far have been very clear so far. I'll say this though. Episode 5, obviously there was a little bit, the lesson that Anakin tried to show Ahsoka was a little bit more hermeneutical. It was a little bit left to interpretation. It kind of had that Miyagi feel to it.
Miyagi.
Yeah, you had to like read between the lines, but we're past that now. The motivations are really lining up and they're very clear.
I'm just a little disappointed that the Miyagi feel didn't include catching flies with chopsticks. That would have been pretty cool.
That'd be epic. Yeah, that'd be epic. Good discussion. You guys have me feeling a little bit more positive about a second galaxy, so I like that. Now we finally get to see Grand Admiral Thrawn. I'm gonna go last. I had two really good things to say about the introduction of Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action. And I have one negative thing that I think missed the mark for me. But I want to hear what you guys think of this. So I think, George, I'm on you first. So you tell us, what do you think of the Grand Admiral Thrawn's introduction here?
So yeah, as I said, the score of him entering in was just phenomenal, because you have the background music, but intertwined with the music, you kind of hear like this, almost like in a past memory, so to speak, where you kind of hear like not like a conversation, but like where you can hear people's voices mixed in with the music. I have to probably rewatch it to see like if you could actually make out some of the words, but it's almost like that it's like pain and suffering like in battle mixed with that hard edged type of music where it's like this guy, whoever, if someone has never seen Rebels before, it's like if they're just watching this for the first time, they're like, okay, this guy means business based off of this music, like this guy's the real deal. So that alone just sets the stage. It's like, but for that to come on in episode 6 and it end in episode 8, I feel like, if knowing Filoni, that's not going to be the end of Thrawn. I feel like 3 episodes, and really you could actually say 2 episodes, because this episode is where they're kind of giving him that introduction in a live action format, and obviously it's just kind of setting the stage. Basically, this is Thrawn's Act 1. So if you're going to kind of give him an Act 2 and an Act 3 within 2 more episodes, I don't feel like it's going to do it justice, and I hope that's not the case of what happened with Snoke. Just saying. But as far as the acting goes, I felt like it was great. Could there possibly have been a few other actors that could have maybe done a little bit better? Possibly, but I still think he's portraying the character well. As we mentioned before, the body kind of like throws it off just based off of, because if we had nothing to go on with the animated, then we'd say, you know what, okay, this is Thrawn. But if you're kind of taking it through the animated standpoint and looking at him as live action, it's like, okay, you could kind of see some differences. It's like Sesame Street. It's like one of these things just doesn't belong here. It's just, but overall, I feel like the introduction to Thrawn is setting the stage for something much bigger. Not even just for Ahsoka or for Ezra or for anybody, but I think honestly this is going to set something up bigger for his story, for his
Absolutely.
What do you think, OG? What do you think? What do you think of the introduction of Thrawn here?
I think it was a strong introduction. I have no complaints in regards to the acting, the way the character was portrayed. Like I said, like when he was talking, I was riveted the whole time. I was latching on to every word. The way he says it, what he says when he's talking about Ahsoka, I want to learn about her culture, her history, her background. That's a very Thrawn thing to say, you know? I think he checks all the boxes. It's just the dad bod. And this is terrible, because I feel like people are going to be like, oh man, OG's fat shaming. I'm not fat shaming. It's just that, like George said, he is portrayed differently in the animation, right?
Right.
So it's hard to... It just doesn't feel like the same, you know what I'm saying? Sure. But outside of that, I think he was handled very well. I like George, the music when he enters in was awesome. I do agree with you, George, too. This is just the beginning. Like Filoni is right now. This is a seed planting thing with Filoni. He is planting seeds, you know. And Ahsoka's doing pretty well. I mean, they're doing very well actually in the numbers for Disney Plus. I mean, I'm sure almost certainly going to get greenlit for a season 2 or something. They're going to have to. So we're going to see, I think, more of Thrawn. We have that Filoni movie. You know, he might show up in that. So yeah, I think Filoni is doing very Filoni things with him, and I think that he's sort of setting the stage. And you mentioned it earlier, Slimer. This episode really sets the stage for everything going forward, and we're all speculating on it. Now you have Thrawn, you got this new galaxy. It's like, oh my god, this is wild. This is absolutely wild. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it was handled very, very well. I think it was. I have very little complaints other than the physicalness of it, and that's minor. So.
So my complaint has not been mentioned yet. So now I'm going to go to Slimer. I'm going to see if he mentions it.
Real quick, Jay, before you go to wait, before you go to Slimer, Jay, really quick, one more thing I wanted to add that when it comes to Thrawn, to have a great villain where you don't necessarily have to have him coming out of the gate enraged and like all up in flames and everything, where when you come into a mindset of power, especially when it's a dark power, that sometimes when you have that cool, calm collectiveness about you, that
scarier.
It's much more scarier because they're so confident within themselves. It's like nothing can touch me. So it's like, why am I having to go into a bothersome? So sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you actually have to watch out for.
Great point.
Good stuff. Slimer, what do you think? How did you like the introduction of Grand Admiral Thrawn here?
The pan down. Remember the panning scene when it panned over the stormtroopers, and you saw Thrawn splitting the stormtroopers as he was walking out of the Star Destroyer, and then, as George said, the very ambiotic noise in the background that evoked certain emotions, and then the organs started playing. The music did a really excellent job of setting the stage. Thrawn really reminds me of like a Hannibal Lecter kind of a character.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, he's obviously a psychopath. Now it doesn't mean that he's an immoral. It doesn't mean that he's immoral, right? I mean, one of the things about Thrawn is he considers himself to be a very moral person. He obviously cares for his troops. We can discuss the troops later, and whether they're alive or dead. With regard to his physicality, this is 9 years after Rebels, so I can expect I'm going to go ahead and say that a gut is probably expected at this point, especially if the Night Witches are, if they're Latin in any way and they're cooking for him. He's definitely...
There you go.
That's a good point.
And that's a fair point. There is a time difference, so that's fair. Yeah.
So he is an older Thrawn. He is past his prime.
True.
He's also been on this planet for about 9 or 10 years. So there is the possibility that the way he's acting right now is a facade. I don't know how anybody would be able to mentally endure being stuck on a desolate planet like this for 10 years, and the only people you can interact with are psychopathic force using witches.
Apparently, that knows how to do home good cooking.
Yeah. So I think there's a duality to Thrawn here. I think his introduction was great. Like OG said, you're hooked onto every word that he says because of the way that he projects his voice. You have to listen to him. He's not going to talk loud so you can hear him. If you're not listening, then he's going to pass you on. So he does embody Thrawn a lot in that sense. And as George says, this is his introduction. This is his act one. Dave Filoni's playing the J.R.R. Tolkien game here. I don't know how many people realize that, but this is the long game, guys. We're not going to get a conclusion at the very end of the season. The season finale is going to be left on a cliffhanger. If for anybody that doesn't know that now, I'm sorry to tell you. The season's going to end on a cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger to me is going to be Thrawn's going to be reintroduced to the Star Wars galaxy, and then the threat, the big threat realization is going to pretty much stop there, and then we'll see how the New Republic handles how to Thrawn's return and how that evolves.
And we'll get into that later on about how we're, but I think you're spot on. I mean, in general, Slimer, I think you're spot on with that. It's going to be a cliffhanger, absolutely.
And you heard it here, folks, from Slimer. This is Star Wars now, so this is the long game. This is not Marvel. It's not Endgame.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's I agree with everything you guys said. I love the music. I'm going to bring up one other thing that I love. I love the shot of the Star Destroyer coming over the top of the island, or the pillar. That was I love seeing the ships in atmosphere because it gives you a sense of scale for how big these ships are. I think that's phenomenal. Here's the problem I had with it. It's probably related to the volume, if I'm being honest. It's probably a volume-related issue. But I'm going to contrast the introduction of Thrawn, and I'm going to use the same contrast later when we talk about Ezra and Sabine. I'm going to contrast that with two of the most epic moments in film history, but I'm going to talk about why they're so epic, right? So one is the introduction of Indiana Jones as a character on screen. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, we're following Indiana Jones through the jungle. We're not seeing his face, but we know that he's cool because everyone else is talking about him. It's like, this is the guy. Where's he leading us? I'm not sure. Two guys see this scary looking thing. They run away. He looks at it. He seems fine. There's this build up to he turns around and there's Harrison Ford. This is Indiana Jones. This is our hero. The buildup is phenomenal. Spielberg is the best at creating emotional moments in these kind of time frames. The second one is another Spielberg one. I'm not being fair here. He's one of the best directors in film history. But it's when Sam Neill's character gets introduced to the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. They first pull up on a bunch of scenes where there's no dinosaurs, and he's getting frustrated. Did I fly all the way to this island not to see any dinosaurs because this crazy person created an island and none of these dinosaurs really exist? Then they pull up into this area, and he zooms in on the face of Sam Elliott, and he zooms in on the face, or Sam Neill and Laura Dern, and he shows their reaction to what they're about to turn and see, which is a dinosaur, a really good dinosaur, the likes of which we haven't seen on screen before, right? And so we share the same emotional response that those characters are showing. Here, the problem I had is that I would have liked to have seen the ship come down. There's an even longer delay. They can all be chanting Thrawn and stuff. That's fine. I don't mind that. But we should almost see like a camera shot that goes along the ground as his legs walk through the scene, and we're tracking through the legs of the stormtroopers as he's walking through. Then we see him in the back, and we go, okay, wait a minute, there he is in the back. And then all of a sudden the camera sweeps around, and now it's his front, or something along those lines to let us go, this is Grand Admiral Thrawn. This is ridiculous. Instead, we kind of get like, there he is. Now, I think it's a function of them not wanting to render some of those things in the volume or create another set that they had to deal with. So they gave us what they gave us with what they had. But
it's a great point,
that was really my only complaint, because I felt like this is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Like, this is, in Star Wars lore, I think you basically go like Darth Vader, and then you go Grand Admiral Thrawn. I realize Palpatine is somewhere up there, taking the notch down from the sequel trilogy, probably. But like these two characters are the kind of characters that you want to have the emotional response of the audience should be this like tense piece of anxiety where you'd go like, oh no, this person's here. Now what's going to happen next, right? There's a little bit of a thrill with that. And I just don't know that they took enough time with that moment to give us what that could have been. So that's my only complaint about the way that Thrawn was introduced. Otherwise, I think it was actually pretty effective, but I wish we could have lingered on it a little bit more.
Jay, you bring up a great point, because it's like in horror movies and stuff, right? A lot of times the scariest horror movies are when you don't see the threat, right? You hear it breathing or whatever, and it kind of gives you that tenseness, right? You're not seeing it right away, so it's like, oh man, this is even worse than if you just saw it. It's the same idea with Thrawn. Like, if you were kind of build that up a little bit, you don't see it necessarily, but you see his effect. Maybe you see just his feet. I think it would have made a bigger impact. That's a great point, Jay. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry, Summer. Go ahead.
No, you're good, brother. You brought up a really good point. Is sometimes just like in a horror movie. Do you like horror movies?
I like them, but they make me anxious.
They work though, right? They work.
They work. It works.
James Wan likes to do this thing, right, in the Insidious movies, where all he does is he just zooms into a dark closet door, and your imagination does all the work.
Right.
It's a $0 effect, or you know what I mean. So, but Jay, I agree with you. I think that Dave Filoni is at a disadvantage, though, in the sense that, Thrawn's introduction is very subjective. If you know who Thrawn is, if you've read Heir to the Empire, if you read about Thrawn, you have a very intimate understanding of the character and his and how much of a threat he is. If you don't, you have to be good enough to use cinematography, as you stated, to tell the audience, hey, this character is really menacing. The only problem is there are very few directors that have cinematographers that they've been working with that can collaborate and do things like that. And you had mentioned Steven Spielberg, which when it comes to introducing a new character, he's the best. I mean,
he's the best.
But again, the cinematographer he uses, I think he's used him for like over 30 years, and I think he died of old age or something like that, or retired, and that's the only reason he stopped using him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great point, man. That intro to Raiders of the Lost Ark, man, where he turns around and the shadow, reveals his entire face and he's sweating and he's scruffy looking. I mean, that's one of the best intros of all time, dude.
Yeah, it is. It's my favorite intro of all time for sure. Go ahead, George.
Well, and it's also too, Jay, when you brought up again, I'm going to use now a reference of Spielberg as well, but of how he did with Jaws. It was the anticipation of not actually seeing the shark. You're actually looking out of the lens of what the shark is seeing. So that is more frightening than you actually looking at a visual of a shark heading towards a human, and you say, okay, I'm looking at the shark about to eat the human. But if you're looking out of the lens of the shark, it's like, oh my gosh, we are heading towards the human. We are getting closer and closer. It's almost like we're the shark. And that becomes more frightful. And then, of course, with John Williams' phenomenal score tied with that, it's like, so yes, actually, I never really thought of that until you just brought it to our attention. It's all about that build-up anticipation of just tweaking a camera angle, or like the perception of how you're looking at something, and it could change the storyline of how you see that character in a much different light.
And that's the brilliance of Spielberg. Go ahead, Slimer.
Go ahead, brother.
No, I was going to say, that's the brilliance of Steven Spielberg. I mean, like, he is the master at doing that. He is the absolute master of invoking that emotion. He knows exactly how to do it every single time. I'm a massive Spielberg fanboy. Like, I seriously, I can't, honestly, I really can't think of a movie that he's made that I have not liked. But go ahead. I sound like a shill, but I'm just being honest. I like all his work.
Same, dude.
The what was I going to bring up? I was going to bring up the same thing happened to me with Darth Vader and Kenobi. We talked about it back on that series.
Right.
I feel like you almost always shoot Darth Vader from below. Because we're all looking up at Darth Vader. Darth Vader is one of the most intimidating figures in film history, and so you always shoot him in a tight, confined space where you're looking up at him, right? Kenobi didn't do that. Kenobi had these like wide shots where like Darth Vader is walking through the dark, and you're like, well, I don't know, he looks kind of small in this dark space. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would have shot him like that. It doesn't seem like the same menacing Vader that when he's walking through a hallway and you're like, I'm stuck with this guy in this room. I don't want to be stuck with this guy in this room, you know?
And Jay, to your credit, you did a video on that. I don't know if it was Story Geeks or How Stories Work, but I remember you did a video on that, why Vader is scary.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of my favorite videos you ever did. I mean, I love that video. But you're right. When you compare, the Kenobi, the Vader in the village scene, where you see it's like the wide shot of him in the village. Okay. Compare that to even like the Rogue One scene, the hallway scene.
Yes.
Oh my God. That hallway scene is out of control. That little space, and he's just sitting there just force pulling these guys up and throwing them on the ceiling and cutting them in half. But it was like you're in that confined space, so it feels so different.
Yeah, it feels so different.
And let's be honest, that's every guy's worst nightmare, to be referred to as small. So I mean, like that's
true.
You can even tell how they shoot Vader different than Palpatine, because Palpatine is not scary because he's imposing, right? So Palpatine, you might see a big throne room shot where he's just this little guy on a chair. And you're like, okay, well, what's the big deal there? But what you know about Palpatine is he controls the entire space that he's in. So he can shoot lightning at you from wherever he wants to, right? So it makes for a different kind of, however the character needs to be perceived is how the character needs to sort of be shot, like how the audience perception of that character should be. Like you said, George, the audience perception of the shark is, what would it be like to not know what was underneath me in the ocean? But it knows, right? It knows where it's going. It knows what it's going to kill, but I don't know. That's terrifying, right? So anyway, so we'll move on from that, because I also have kind of a similar complaint about the Ezra Sabine reunion. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Before we talk about that, what do you actually think that Baylan is up to, OG? Like, we've got little hints here and there, but we're not quite sure. What is he up to?
Okay, here's the thing. We see him talking to his apprentice about empires rise, empires fall. And it's this repetitive thing, up and down, rise and fall, rise and fall. And he mentions to her, I'm going to change that by going to the beginning, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I don't know what he means by that. I really don't. Like, is he trying to get to a place where he can like alter the course of history? Is there something where he's trying to sort of, I don't know. That's where I'm kind of confused with, because he wants to go to the beginning. So he's kind of implying like he wants to. Okay, look, he's complaining about the rise and the fall of these empires, and it's an ongoing repetitive cycle. And he claims he can fix it if he just gets to the beginning. So he's implying, if I can get to the beginning and I can do whatever I got to do, that I can change the course of history. And that's not going to be the case anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like leaning in that direction, as to like, he's trying to get something or get to a place where he can kind of alter the way things are done from going back to the beginning. But I don't know what that is. I mean, in all honesty, and that's really the beauty, I think, a little with this episode, is that it does leave, and Slimer, you mentioned it leaves a lot to the imagination. It leaves a lot. It makes the viewer really think about, what does he mean by that? Why does he need to go to the beginning? What is the beginning? What does that even mean? And is it like a time travel thing that he's going to do? Is he going to like change history and the empire won't exist, anymore? Or what is that exactly? So I don't know.
And it gives these characters more relevance, because they're not just characters that are just, okay, we're going to throw these characters in here in this story just for the sake, just to kind of use as a filler. It's like Filoni's given these characters to have a specific purpose as to what's going on as the story continues, but then it evolves where they have their own individual storyline that even though we don't know it, obviously Filoni knows it, these characters know it. So it's like, as time goes on, and I do agree with OG, that's something that I can appreciate with this episode, that even though it's somewhat of a negative for me because it's titled for Ahsoka, but aside from that, just the storyline that each character arc is now growing and leading towards something, but they're all not going the same path. So you have this thread line of Thrawn and his story and his ultimate goal, and then you have Ezra, you have Sabine, so it's like it's almost like from this episode it created 3 separate individual storylines that it can literally go anywhere at this point. And I like that. I like where a storyline isn't just, it's so typical where it's like, okay, I know what the ending's going to be. It's like, boy's going to fall in love with girl, they're going to kiss, make out, curtain closes, and that's the end. It's like, I don't like that. I mean, it's okay, but it's like, if you do that with every single show or movie, it's like, I like a different plot twist.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're telling me somehow Palpatine Returned wasn't a plot twist?
That was pretty deep stuff right there. Pretty deep stuff.
Yeah, that was a track switch is what that was.
It was here. You know what? We have a track switch, Jay. We got to play it. I just want to real quick before we move on. It'll be real quick, I promise. That was the thing that really frustrated me because I was kind of hoping, like, there were rumors actually with the whole Rise of Skywalker thing that there was going to be like an acolyte or like this sort of like Star Wars priest that sort of summons the spirit of Palpatine and and kind of like possesses like a host. And that was the whole Matt Smith rumor. Like, there was rumors that Matt Smith was going to be in that movie, and he was going to be actually one of those acolytes that was possessed by the spirit of Palpatine. I would have loved the hell out of that. That would have made way more sense. It would have been way creepy. And then he could possess Matt Smith. But then if Rey were to defeat Matt Smith, then maybe he would possess Rey. I mean, that would just be insane, dude. And instead we got somehow he returned. I don't know. I don't understand that. I think that would have been such a better story device to have that demonic possession of Palpatine. How dope that would be. And he could switch bodies.
Well, if you remember, OG, it was either the teaser trailer or the actual trailer of what was it? Was it The Last Jedi? It was either The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker.
With Dark Rey.
With Dark Rey. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it was like, when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, she is possessed by the dark side of the Force. Like, that is so phenomenal. And then I just, like, I'm sitting there in the theater and I was like, oh man, that's really what it was about? Like, okay.
Yeah. I tell you, man, the Dark Rey, man, turned me on.
I think all that stuff could have worked if you kept Snoke on the table, and taking Snoke off the table, to George's point last week.
Right.
As soon as you take Snoke off the table, all of these things are like, you get to rush things. You have to take Kylo on a journey that I don't think Kylo was intended to necessarily go on at that point in time. Right. That's a rough decision to make in the middle of a trilogy. Like, the literal dead center of the trilogy, be like, kill the most baddest guy that we know right now. It's like, well, what do you do with that? All right, Slimer, what do you think? What's going on with Baylan? What's he doing? What's he up to?
Well, I think we need to try to I think we need to do a little bit of a psychological evaluation on Baylan first. Right. So he said a couple things that are really important. He said he was disillusioned with the Jedi. He admires what the Jedi stood for, at least idealistically, although he believes that, being idealistic and being realistic are two totally different things. And obviously he sides with being realistic, which is learning both sides of the Force, but not necessarily aligning yourself with the one side versus the other. He believes that both are necessary in order to will his self to power. But he's nihilistic. I think that we can go ahead and just categorize him as a nihilistic. And the reason I say that is because I did some research on the last names of Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, and there's Dave Filoni had based their names off of Nordic mythology, and the Skoll and Hati are the black wolf and the white wolf. And I'm not going to quote the mythology exactly as it was stated. I'm not going to interpret this or anything like that. But one chases the sun and one chases the moon. And Hati chases the sun and Skoll chases the moon. And those are supposed to be metaphorical representations of dark and light. And so while Baylan Skoll seems like he's more aligned with the light side, and even Shin Hati said that, they need to go after power. So she seems power hungry, but I don't think she understands what power is. She's too young. She's very ignorant of the world still, because she's still a Padawan and she doesn't have experience like Baylan Skoll, who's the general during the Clone Wars. But I think he's a nihilist, and I think that what he wants to do is, I think he wants to summon. I got two theories. Okay, one is not mine. Okay, one is the preeminent theory that's going on the YouTubes right now. That is that he wants to summon Abeloth. Okay, Abeloth was the mother of the Mortis gods. She was a human. She married the father Mortis god, and once she married him, the son and the daughter Mortis daughter, Mortis son, they honored her marriage and things like that. But because she was human and she wasn't immortal, so what happened was she drank out of the fountain of knowledge. She drank out of the fountain of power. She became this thing more powerful than the Mortis gods, and they banished, and the Mortis son and daughter and the father banished her to a planet, and she's like this evil thing. And supposedly, from my understanding, is that she would bring Ragnarok. Okay, that ties into the last names Shin and Hati. Shin and Hati brought Ragnarok in Norse mythology. So he's probably trying to, or I would say Abeloth is summoning him through the Force, so she can come back. But to him, he's seeing it as a way to end the universe in some kind of a capacity, because he's nihilistic. Again, remember, nothing matters. There's no hope. That's how nihilists think. And now my other theory is, and this goes to OG's point, he does mention beginning. What if the thing that they're looking for is not necessarily embedded in the planet or tied to the planet, but what if it's associated with someone on the planet? That is Ezra. So Ezra has the ability to open up the world between worlds. Okay, now in the world between worlds, it's like, what is that movie? Interstellar. It's like the fifth dimension. It's like you're looking at time. You can go anywhere in time. It's not necessarily time travel, but if time is linear and you're outside of it, you can access any point within that timeline, all the way from the beginning to the end.
Well said.
So what if his plan is to force Ezra's hand to give him access to the world between worlds, using Sabine as bait. In other words, if you don't open the world between worlds, me and Shin are going to kill Sabine. So he opens it, and he wants to go into the world between worlds to go all the way back to the Old Republic. Okay, we're talking about like Tales of the Jedi era, Exar Kun and Kale Kildrum and all that. And he wants to go back and teach a corrupted version of the Force that does not delineate between light side and the dark side. Because remember, his beef is with this notion of there being light and dark. Okay, that is the inherent issue with the Force users, is that they think of it as two different things, when in actuality, for him, it's not, right? So he wants to corrupt it, and if he can go back and corrupt the teachings of the Jedi, then there will be no light side, and so he'll change the trajectory of the Star Wars universe forever, thus eliminating the continuous battle between light side and dark side, and eliminating the turmoil of the galaxy.
That's something like, I think it was you, Slimer, who mentioned that Filoni is going for that end game moment. And that's a huge thing. Like, that would be a massive thing in the Star Wars universe, if that's like for his movie, for that to be that's what's driving these characters. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Now, if he goes into the world between worlds, let's say this is how it plays out. He goes into the world between worlds. We all know who would be waiting for him. Anakin Skywalker.
That would be awesome. Yeah. So I think you nailed it, basically, because there's a couple other things that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about when you do the psychological analysis of Baylan.
Right.
Morgan calls Baylan and Shin mercenaries. She doesn't say these are my partners that were essential to me getting here and getting you back. She calls them mercenaries, right? As if they don't have anything to do with what's going to happen with Morgan and Thrawn. It's like they're just along for the ride. On top of that, it doesn't seem at all like Baylan has thrown himself in with Thrawn. In fact, Shin points out to him, like, well, now we've aligned ourselves with Thrawn. He's like, well, not really. I mean, I'm just using Thrawn. I mean, he happens to be here, but I just wanted to get to this part of the galaxy. So I think what we can safely say is that his end game has nothing to do with what Thrawn wants, which is to go back to the Star Wars galaxy and take it over. He wants to do, I think you nailed it, and I think it's either one of two things. One, he goes back and actually eliminates the Force altogether, so that the Force does not exist. So whenever the moment the Force became a metaphysical element of the universe, he's going to eliminate that so that no one can use the Force ever. Or that means he's lying to people about getting the power. What he means by getting the power is taking that kind of power away from everyone. Or he could, that would be the truly nihilistic thing to do, right? Like, that would be like, which I agree, he is a nihilist. The other option would be, this would be a little bit more Star Warsy, would be that he's going to try and take whatever created the Force and take all of the power of the Force into himself and not let anyone else have it. So he's either lying to Shin or he's being truthful to Shin. I tend to think a little bit more in Slimer's line of thinking that he's lying, and his goal is to just destroy the Force altogether, and there will be no such thing as the Force.
Well, and it could, to your point, Jay, from earlier, it could also tie into the Mangold movie. That whole movie is like about the birth of the Jedi, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. It could be he could go back into that era and mess with it with the birth of the Jedi, and that would tie into the new movie. And it's like, oh god, that's like Disney synergy, like flywheel, perfect. You know,
Back to the Future 2 stuff.
Right,
exactly. Yeah, I think so. We could what we could be saying is that Ahsoka is a preview for all of the movies that are coming out later, right? Like it'd be interesting to see if that's the way that they do it. But I think it's an excellent breakdown, Slimer. So I'm totally with you. All right, so let's move on to anybody else want to talk about Baylan stuff? Were you gonna say something about Baylan, OG?
Well, I just want to say real quick, it really sucks we lost Ray Stevenson so soon because this guy is amazing. Like I'm watching this episode and he's just, God, man, it sucks, dude. Yeah. What a talent! What a talent!
In a wealth of resources, most of which are nostalgic to us because we've seen Rebels or we've seen the Clone Wars. Baylan stands out as like the guy we've never seen before who doesn't have that many lines, but every single time Ray Stevenson delivers one, we go, this guy's amazing. Like this guy's is awesome. It's awesome.
It's really tragic, but yeah, he is absolutely crushing it in this series. He's doing a phenomenal job. So
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, shout out to our buddy Nerd Soul, who I'm going to try to get him on the finale episode that we do in a couple weeks. Yes. I'm going to try to get him on there because I've been talking to him. If you want to listen to me on his channel, he and I talk about these episodes every week as well. Shout out to him. We talked a lot about this on his episode, but I still want to get your guys' take on this. The reunion of Ezra and Sabine. Okay, what did you think about that reunion, OG? What are your thoughts about the reunion of Ezra and Sabine?
Here's the thing, because I've talked about the music a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I think the music affected me on that because like I was kind of like, oh god, there's a bunch of like the turtles. I'm like, what are the turtles? What's with all the turtles? You know, like that's weird. You know.
Yeah.
But the music, just like the Kiner score, it just drew me in. I mean, that was really where my mind was most of the time. I thought it was cool. I thought it was emotional. I think Harloff brought up a great point. Christian Harloff.
Yeah.
Who I absolutely love. Who was actually an inspiration for me to even start this channel in the first place. I absolutely love
Really?
Christian Harloff. Yes. His Jedi Council show is what inspired me to start OG55. Absolutely. With him and John Campy and Mark Ellis. Yeah, that triggered the whole thing. But long story. Yeah, Schmoes know. Exactly. No, but he made a great point when, like, I think one of the big, okay, I thought it was great. I think that one of the big moments though that were kind of like that was kind of like whatever. And I agree with Harloff on this is when Ezra asks her like what happened, and she's like, oh, we'll talk about it later. It's like, no, we'll talk about it fucking now. Let's go. You know? Like, what are you doing? We'll talk about it later. You know, I think Harloff had a great point with that, and that's my biggest criticism with the whole thing. Otherwise, I thought it was a really emotional kind of reunion. I thought it was cool, and I've said it before, Jay, like on the show many times. I actually, a lot of fans don't like Sabine in this. I dig her. I think she's pretty cool. I like her. I thought they casted Ezra perfectly, absolutely perfectly. I thought there's a lot of emotion between the two characters. Overall, I dug it. A little weird, but overall, it was cool. I thought it did its job. Absolutely, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
What do you think, Slimer?
I'm with OG. I actually love the actress that's portraying Sabine. She's one of the best actors on the show. She really is, and a lot. You know, she's getting a lot of shit she doesn't deserve. Really, to be honest with you. As far as what I think about the reunion, I think the reunion depends on how much of a Rebels fan you are, and as somebody that and if you're trying to make this appealing to all fans, whether they're hardcore fans or just casual fans, you got to sell it. You got to sell it, and the problem with that scene for me is the music did all the heavy lifting. And if I were a director, I would have told the actress that's playing Sabine, I'm sorry I don't know her name because she's so good and she's very attractive.
Yeah, fair. I agree with you.
Yeah. OG, I know you think she is. But I would have forced her to do a couple more cuts where she evokes more emotions, where she hugs Ezra. She was just like, "Oh, Ezra, hello," and I didn't buy it. The music sold it.
Yeah, the music did.
The music and the acting, they weren't in concert with each other, and at that point, I was just like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, you're right though, Slimer. It's the music. Like I said, like with my take, I was like, my head was in the music the whole time almost. You know, like forget the turtles, forget the like the music. Oh my god, it's amazing.
The scene should have interpreted what the music was giving us.
Yes,
and it seemed like both of them were not compatible. There you go. They both weren't compatible with one another, and that's what kind of threw the scene off. It's because you have this phenomenal background score, and then you're looking at the two of them, and when they come in for the hug, it almost felt like it was awkward. It was like it's like when you have like that high school boy, high school girl that's going out on the prom date, and it's like, oh, I want to give her a hug. I don't know if I should, but it's like, okay, little pat, little tap, and it's like she is like in such force to try to find him, and then when she finds him, they give this awkward hug, and then as you had mentioned, OG, like it's like, what's going on? What happened? Oh, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, that was weird. I gotta agree with Harlov on that, man. That was a weird moment. You know, like, what do you mean you don't want to talk about it?
And Jay, you know what? I think something you probably thought about too is usually in a really good hugging scene, when somebody, when there's a sense of longing, there's usually a close-up shot of both people that are hugging, to really capture all the emotions that inhabit.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see it. I don't. If I saw it, I don't remember, which means it was unmemorable.
And also,
no, I'm almost positive it didn't exist. There's just two medium shots, and one of them is of her face, and one of them is of his face. But there's no close-ups. It's all medium shots shot from further away.
It was a shot done at 8:00 at night, and everybody wanted to go home.
Yeah,
and they're just like, "Hey, let's just wrap this."
And just as Slimer, you mentioned couple minutes ago, like if you're a Rebels fan and you see the chemistry between these two in the animated series, and it's like that buildup of them not seeing each other after so long, it's like I'm like waiting for, like, even going a step further, I was like waiting for her to suck his lips off. It was like, okay, I'm getting like we're gonna get like this slam banger of a scene, and it's like damn,
come on.
Well, to your point, George.
Suck her lips out.
Wait. So my comment of sucking his lips off actually made a point.
It was a poignant point. No, because what I was gonna say was I've not seen the ending of Rebels yet. I'm still halfway through Rebels, besides the World Between Worlds episode, and there was some thought process that Sabine and Ezra might actually have a romantic connection.
Yeah.
So that would have been way better, by the way. If they had a romantic connection, that would make more sense for the decisions that Sabine is making and why she's making them. But let's just say that wasn't the case. This is the exact same example I gave to Nerd Soul when we talked on Wednesday. I said to Nerd Soul, my mother passed away over 10 years ago, okay? If my mom suddenly walked into this room right now, excuse my language, but fuck you guys, I'm gonna go hug my mom immediately, right? Like, I'm not even gonna hesitate. There's not gonna be like a oh, hey, glad to see you, buddy. Like, that's ludicrous. So there's two things that bothered me a lot about this scene. One is that Sabine's whole purpose of disobeying Ahsoka, who she does regard with a great deal of respect.
Right.
The only reason she disobeys her to go with Baylan is because she cares so much about Ezra. Okay, so we know that going in, she made this decision because she cares so much about Ezra. That's a very Star Wars thing to do. Cool. I expect her to care about him when she sees him, not like, hey, bring it in for the friends don't shake, friends hug, right? Like, come on, So the other complaint I have about it is that, again, this is a moment where she walks into this little village. She does not know Ezra is there. The first shot we see of Ezra is a pan over to there's Ezra. Why did you not give us a shot of one of Ezra's pieces of memorabilia that we all know from Rebels that's sitting out amongst those turtle people, right? And we go, oh, wait a minute, is Ezra here? Is Ezra here? And then we have a shot of just someone leaning against one of the tents, and it's just them from the back, and we can't really tell who it is, but we see Sabine in the background, and then she turns around slowly, and then boom, there's Ezra, and they just run together to hug each other and maybe suck each other's lips off. I mean, to me,
breaking news: Dave Filoni gets replaced by Jay Sherer.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. I don't want to take it on that. But and by the way, Dave Filoni did not direct this particular episode. Right. I don't believe so.
I believe it was I think it was I forget her name, but it was actually a female that directed.
Okay. And there was moments of this that were directed really fantastic. So I'm not picking on, but what I am picking up on is that, so as a person who's done a lot of writing, like the writing needs to display the level of emotion that needs to go into this reunion. And to me, this reunion, it was all in the music. It was 100% in the music, and it was in nothing else. It wasn't in the dialogue. It was not in the behaviors of the character on screen. But so the only person who understood what this scene needed to be was the person who wrote the music. And it's like, oh, bummer, man. Like, this could have been such a powerful moment.
And this scene, unfortunately, I would have to give the downfall to the director, because we know that these actors can act well, especially. And so, like, when we see these pinnacle moments, it's like, wow, like all the raw emotion that they're putting into these characters. And then when you see a scene like this, it's like, well, obviously it's not the actor, because we'd be getting this throughout the whole entire series. It has to be in the director's moment, unfortunately. And as you mentioned, Jay, there are some sequences in this episode that are very strong hitting, but then there's some that kind of plateau.
I want to kind of expand on this, if that's okay, Jay.
Go for it.
All right. I can guarantee you that they're squabbling about what kind of relationship those two characters had. There must be. And I think the director had their hands cuffed. I mean, this is Disney. They're very strict about what happens on set. They have a vision and they stick with their vision. The problem is they acted exactly how the actors were written, and that is that they're friends, and that's the problem. Now, to add to another larger issue, is that Star Wars has been devoid of any romance for a long time.
Yes.
And this would have been a great opportunity to bring that romance back into the franchise. It is sorely lacking romance, and a lot of people didn't like the Rey and Kylo Ren kiss. I'm a big fan of that scene.
Yep.
I'm a Reylo guy. All right, I love the whole Reylo concept. I love it.
Too.
I'm a sucker for it. Yeah, thanks, Yoji. Appreciate you. We're the only two people on the planet that are okay.
Well, it just felt right. It felt like a reverse. It felt like a reverse Anakin and Padme kind of situation. I don't know. It just felt really like, okay, the execution might not have been there necessarily. I can see where people might argue that, but the idea of a dark side user falling in love with the light side Jedi girl. And then he gets redeemed. It's like a reverse Anakin, basically. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a brilliant idea. Was it executed well? Okay, that's up for debate.
That's where I had the issue with.
Yeah.
It wasn't the actual concept of the idea. I actually think it's pretty killer to actually incorporate that into the Star Wars universe. It was just how it was executed, as you said, OG. That was
and just to put this in real quick too. It's not even just Rey and Kylo, because they killed the Rey Finn romance. Like they killed every sense of romance that they could have had. Besides, like, now in the Kylo Ren Rey thing, they kind of pulled it off in the end, execution wise, a little weird. But like Disney has systematically like removed. So I could not agree with you more, Slimer. Like, they need more romance in Star Wars. Han Solo and Leia were two of the most romantic couples in film history. Like, come on, give me a break. Like.
Right.
And they had a child together, obviously. Yeah. So, I mean, like, that puts it to a whole new meaning of, like, what happened after in a galaxy far, far away. It's just...
Guys, Star Wars is a space soap opera. Not my words. George
Lucas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we all know what happens in soap operas.
Yeah. No, you need that romance. You need to bring that back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100% Slimer. Well said, brother. Well said.
So I didn't have this question on the list. We are going to get into the how we think this is going to go moving.
Sure.
We've talked about that a little bit. We're going to cover that a little bit more. But I did want to ask you guys about we brought up the fact of like, is Thrawn's army just all consisting of dead soldiers? But I also wanted to pick up on one other thing. So this question is a broad question about Thrawn's army. But OG, I want to ask you about this first because
sure.
You've said this in the past to me where Filoni takes everything about Star Wars and then like adds some other element, right? Where he like spray paints the helmets and he does this.
Yeah, it's weird.
And it was interesting to me to see Thrawn as a very put together individual who has access to apparently some sort of gold. I don't know if it's actual gold or whatever, but like the Star Destroyer was augmented in gold. So whatever it was damaged from, they had gold reserves to bring in and put on there. The armor had gold on it to repair some of the things, but they also had the red bandages that Dathomiri. Yeah. Now you're a guy that doesn't like that kind of stuff. I did not. This is the first time it kind of threw me because I went. It seems like of all the armies in the world, Thrawn's army would be the one that was the most aesthetically pleasing. Yes. You know what I mean? Like the guy loves art, and I'm looking at these stormtroopers, and they look like they're kind of a mess. So what did you think? What did you guys think about that?
No, you're 100% Jay on that. 100%. This guy is an art fanatic, and you're right. Everything's a mess. Like the stormtroopers are all dirty, banged up. They got like red duct tape all over the place. Now, here's the thing: the Enoch character.
Yeah.
Is that a character that Filoni created, or does that predate Filoni?
I don't know.
Do we know?
I would have thought that it was a character that Filoni created because I've never seen that before. I've never seen it before.
Me neither. And that was one of those. That was a perfect example of what I was talking about with the helmets and stuff, right? Like I talked about so many times, like on Rebels with the spray paint, how it feels out of universe for me. You know, Filoni understands Star Wars like so well, but then out of nowhere he'll come up with this stuff like the spray paint stuff, and it's just so not Star Wars. Like it's just like this random thing that is like, wow, that's a departure. You know, the Enoch thing was that moment for me when I saw that dude turn around and he had like the stormtrooper outfit on, but then like the gold like face. I was like, this feels more like MODOK from like Ant-Man or something. Like this didn't feel like to me a Star Wars thing. And it kind of took me out of it a little bit with that. That was a little weird. No, like, it came and went. It wasn't very long, you know, it was a few minutes, no big deal. But I agree with you, man. I think 100%. Like I think that like when it comes to Thrawn, he's this gentleman, you know, he's not going to get angry. He's not going to scream at you. He's a Hannibal Lecter, as Slimer said. He's a Hannibal Lecter, kind of the smooth, polite kind of guy, but he's gonna kill you in your sleep kind of energy, right? Yeah. And a guy like that, I would think would have a little bit more of a put together army with the gold and just everything is so pristine, and he's such a gentleman, right? And it just seems really ragtag. Yeah. So yeah, that is. I've never even considered that, but 100% Jay.
He seems like the kind of guy who would have them drilling on like polish your armor, make sure your bed sheets are tucked in. Like, you know, like he seems like that kind of guy. What do you think, Slimer?
Totally.
What do you think of that whole army scene and how that was all put together?
Well, let's assume that these night troopers are dead. Okay. Then if they're dead, then all that what you said is all out the window. If they were live stormtroopers and you know he was in garrison, and you know the rules still applied, then absolutely. I mean, everybody would spit shine in their plastic ass covers. You know, but I don't think that's the case. You know, going back to something that I said a little bit earlier, I think that he's desperate, and I think that the way that he's presenting himself is a facade, and I think that inside he's hurting, and you don't see that because he's so good at hiding what he's really feeling. I do think that the gold mask stormtrooper, Enoch is his name is. You know, of course, there's a biblical reference. Enoch was somebody that went to earth or went to heaven without actually dying, and so he actually holds a special place in heaven. He actually is the he became an angel. I can't remember what his name was, his angelic name, but essentially he was over all the other angels. Now, knowing Dave Filoni and knowing George Lucas and how everything has a meaning, how everything ties to actual history and actual mythology, how that's going to play out. I don't really know. It's very possible that Enoch is an actual human being, and that's like the one person that Thrawn actually trusts because he's not, he's not like what is his name, Morok, the Sith guy that we all thought was Starkiller for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd play out, but I'm kind of glad that it didn't either because I don't like when everybody's theories are right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I think this is a facade, and Thrawn really just needs to get back to the galaxy. Once he gets back to the galaxy, it's like when Thanos puts on the glove. It's game over. Once he has his armada, once the set look, it's not even that. Once the Senate finds out that Thrawn is back, all of the Palpatine Thrawn loyalists are going to they're going to disband. They're going to separate themselves from Mon Mothma and the rest of the senators and the rest of the rules they're trying to reestablish the New Republic. Because not everybody believes in the New Republic. You got to remember, you have a lot of Palpatine loyalists, you have Thrawn loyalists, you have Separatist loyalists. I mean, shit's going to really hit the fan when he comes back, and I don't think that can really be understated.
Yeah.
That's going to put the war back in Star Wars, and it's going to lead to that Heir of the Empire movie.
Great point.
Nice.
Great point. George, what do you think? Any additional thoughts to add here? Did it bother you? Did it not bother you?
Okay, so this might be a little bit far-fetched, but what the hell? Well, I'm already beyond that point. So when you look at a character like Thrawn, like how you all mentioned, he's so prim, proper, pristine. He's like, I mean, like you could practically stick a lump of coal up his ass in 2 days, you'd have a diamond. In the words of Ferris Bueller. but so when you
here for the laughs.
But when you see his army, it's the complete opposite. So it's almost like a representation of on the outside of how you see Thrawn, but inside you have this diabolical monster that is just like waiting to be unleashed. And it's almost like, this is where the far-fetched part comes into play. If any of you seen the Disney animated film, The Great Mouse Detective.
Yes.
Back in the day,
in theaters.
Okay. Oh, nice. Okay. So you guys will actually know what I'm talking about. So at the very end, when you see Ratigan, like throughout the whole movie, Ratigan, he's trying to withhold like this proper, he's not that typical rat, and so he's playing it cool, calm. But at the very end, you see him actually become what everybody was referring to him as a rat. He becomes this very snarly kind of red eyes and like just on the attack at Big Ben. And it's like I almost kind of see that villainous interpretation of Thrawn, and I feel like there's a possibility we may get that moving forward. We may not get it within the Ahsoka series, but I think just Thrawn as a character in general, it's that build up of anticipation, even from back in Rebels. It's like we're seeing this character just kind of playing it cool, but it's like at the moment of vulnerability that something is just going to be unleashed, and it's like, damn, this guy is like badass. And I feel like that's the interpretation I'm getting with his soldiers, that he's rare and ready for battle.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Cool.
Interesting comparison too. I never would have thought going into this show, that was not on my bingo card, that we would compare Ahsoka with the Great Mouse Detective. That is amazing.
That's perfect. All right, last question, then we'll close it out real quick. Last question, and Slimer, this goes to you first, and you've said some things about this already, which is perfect. How does this end? In fact, not only how does it end, what does it set up, and then describe to me what you think the last shot is of this series.
Okay. All right. So OG sent me your questions earlier today.
Yeah.
And my autism just went for about 7 hours thinking about how this is going to play out. I'm going to give you guys the long, okay? Because the long is really important. I can't you can't give the short script version of how this is going to play out because again, this is J.R.R. Tolkien. This isn't this isn't a one movie one and done. This isn't a Michael Bay film. Here's what's going to happen, okay? And let's keep with Thrawn. I want to keep Balin out of this. And while Balin might actually bring out the bigger antagonist, crossing the bigger Star Wars universe and leading up to this and that and the other, let's just try to focus on Thrawn for a second and what kind of implications it's going to have for our characters. Because I feel like Thrawn is probably going to have the most implication with the characters that we've been introduced to so far, both in Mandalorian and in Ahsoka. Okay, so Thrawn is going to come back to a very fragile New Republic. I mean, that's already been elucidated on both in Mandalorian and in this show here as well. When he comes back, that's when the New Republic is really going to start falling apart. I think that here's what I would like to see. Okay, if Dave Filoni is smart, and if the people over ILM have already figured out how to do the deep fakes, we're going to see a young Leia, Senator Leia. We're going to see a young Han Solo, and we're going to see a young Luke Skywalker. Leia is heavily involved with what's going on with the Republic. That's her passion. That's her calling. Not being a Jedi. That's Luke's calling. Okay. Han, let's say he's still with the Republic at this point in time. Okay, that he hasn't abandoned his kid and gone off with Chewie trying to sell whatever the shit he likes to sell people in the galaxy. Okay. But I would like to see how this affects the Republic. I would like to see how this affects OT characters specifically. I think that's you can't underestimate how important it would be and how much Star Wars fans would positively react to OT characters like Leia, Han, and Luke and Lando Calrissian specifically being involved in the Return of Thrawn. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of things are happening right now. The New Republic is disillusioned with the Jedi for several reasons. One, Palpatine has made them disillusioned with the Jedi. He actually, and this is going to apply specifically to Palpatine sympathizers. Once they find out that a remnant of the Empire is back, they're going to align with him completely because they see him as a point of strength, whereas the Republic obviously is not at this point. Secondly, the New Republic, I don't think that they want the Jedi Order to have any part of the New Republic. And the reason is because the Jedi at the height of their power did not see the Sith, and they were so aligned with the Republic that Palpatine's will became their will. I'm not sure if I said that clear enough. They were so blind to the presence of the Sith, and they were so aligned with the Republic, Palpatine's will became their will, and the New Republic knows that. They know that the Jedi were culpable in the fall of the Republic, and so I think that there is a fraction between the Republic and the Jedi Order. I don't think that Luke Skywalker has anything to do with the Jedi Order. I think Luke Skywalker has probably foregone the New Republic. I think that he wants to focus on building a Jedi temple, but at the same time, though, I don't think the Republic has any place for any Force users whatsoever. I think that they've stripped away the Jedi from their ability to have any sort of dictation as to what happens because of what happened during the Clone Wars and the culmination of the Clone Wars. Now, how this plays into Leia, I think that I would like to see Kylo Ren already being born, and Admiral Thrawn's return, forcing Leia to give Kylo Ren to Luke Skywalker on another planet to keep her son safe with Luke Skywalker while they try to deal with this returning reemergence of the Empire. And that's about as far as I've gone with this little thought experiment. So I'm going to leave it at that.
I'm
That's
a bit
phenomenal.
disappointed. I'm a bit disappointed, Slimer. I expected more.
I know you hit the nail on the head, Slimer.
That was great. That was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and I completely. That's kind of where my mind's going to. I think that this whole thing is leading up to the return of Thrawn into the Star Wars universe, right? And I'm very curious to see like what Slimer was talking about, how the original characters are gonna how they're gonna react to this. You know, like you said, Ben Solo and all that, like being born. I think there's a lot of potential there. So I think that's absolutely where they're going with this. It's going to cause a lot. It's going to cause a massive upheaval in Star Wars, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that drama plays out. So, and there's a ton of storytelling potential there. I mean, this is crazy that we have Filoni to play in that sandbox. I mean, what he can do with this is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So, and here's the other thing too. Speaking of Filoni, we have now 2 shows. We got Mando, which was very much a Filoni thing with Favreau, and now we have Ahsoka, which is very much a Filoni thing. Favreau is involved, but I think it's mostly a Filoni thing. I mean, in terms of Filoni, I mean his street cred is killing it, and I think that like the powers that be, like the Bob Iger and all them, they notice that. And I think Star Wars. I think it's Filoni Star Wars kind of going forward. Like you can't tell me like Bob Iger right now, especially with all the financial stuff going on with the whole company. I'm not even talking about Star Wars necessarily, but just overall, that he's not looking at Filoni going every time this guy drops something, it's a golden egg. Like they're noticing that stuff. So I don't know. Look, I'm not saying he's necessarily going to take over for Kennedy, because I don't know if he has the chops for that, because Kenny's job is a lot bigger than just knowing Star Wars lore. It's a studio executive, right?
He really shouldn't take over for Kennedy.
No, absolutely not. I agree with you on that. I agree with you. But I do think his role within Star Wars is going to be, within Lucasfilm, is going to be very much amplified. And I think that the stories going forward is going to be very much driven around this Filoni-verse and stuff. So
he should be the Kevin Feige of Star Wars is what he should be.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely.
And Filoni's a phenomenal creative and in storytelling, and that's where he has that under his belt, where moving forward, I feel like can honestly save Star Wars. And I feel like you have these Star Wars diehards that only go by the original concept of what Star Wars is. It's like they treat it as their Bible. And it's like if you mess with that and you hinder at that and tweak it, they go absolutely bonkers, which, I could respectfully say, to the people who love, the original, and it's like that's just their little pan box, that's perfectly fine. But I feel like there is time for change to kind of break out of that and see where this other galaxy, so to speak, can take us, where a brand new set of stories can be told. Because I feel like, as it says, in a galaxy far, far away, it's like we're not just sticking to just one pinnacle galaxy. It's like there's so much out there, and it's like, why not expand that Star Wars universe?
Dave Filoni's advantage is that he doesn't play it safe. Exactly, he doesn't play it safe. Whereas with 7, 8, 9. I'm a sequel fan, honestly. I'm not digging 7, 8, and 9, but they kind of played it safe in a lot of sense, and in some sense they didn't. Some movies were, Last Jedi obviously took the most risk, but George, you're absolutely right, dude. They need somebody that has balls to the walls, man, to just go out there and kill characters that you don't think are going to be killed, make good guys bad guys. Play in the sandbox and Jay, I think you're right. I think he should be the creative. I think he should have creative veto power over the entire Star Wars franchise.
You got to take risks. You got to swing for the fences.
And that's where Marvel kind of has that upper hand on Star Wars right now. And I feel like with Filoni, if done correctly, Star Wars can kind of go a little bit above and beyond Marvel right now, because Marvel's just kind of starting to plateau in their own way. But I mean, like in the original, like when you look at Marvel, it's like you could pretty much do anything it not make sense, but at the same time make sense because it's
Right.
in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where like nothing holds bar, and it's like I feel like that's where Star Wars needs to go, and hopefully in time. And I know we're not talking about parks or anything, but it's like I feel like that could also play into Galaxy's Edge because Galaxy's Edge is like one straight line of just one era of Star Wars, where it's like now if we break out of that, maybe that could end up helping Galaxy's Edge.
So what George is saying is we need to add a Hulk to Star Wars.
Hulk smash!
Is what he's saying basically right there.
I like
I'm just
that.
kidding.
The only thing I'm going to add to Slimer's excellent breakdown is that here's a couple other thoughts. To me, the series is going to end with the Star Destroyer being put into the ring, the hyperspace ring that can jump between galaxies. The Star Destroyer is going to cruise into that ring, dock on that ring, and Thrawn. That's how Thrawn gets back to the Star Wars galaxy. I think that what's going to actually happen as well is whether or not Baylan might be successful. I don't know what they're going to do. They might make him a masked character and just replace Ray Stevenson with a non-face character. If he's going back with Thrawn, there's a chance that he doesn't go back with Thrawn and that Baylan was only the villain to exist in this specific series, and whatever he attempts to do will be his undoing. Therefore, he has no effect going forward. I don't know that, and I don't know if they reshot that or if it's just the way that it is. But I do think that the end of this series is going to be Ezra, Ahsoka, Shin, and Sabine exiled now in this galaxy on Peridia. And they do not go back to the Star Wars galaxy, which makes it even worse, and the stakes are even higher for the people who are back in the Star Wars galaxy because they don't have some of their key players anymore. Those key players are exiled back on the planet. So, but other than that, I think what Slimer's imagining is really accurate. The only thing that I'm not sure about, I think it would be amazing. I just don't know how they're going to pull it off. I don't know how you bring back the original trilogy characters again, and even younger ones. I'm not sure how you. I mean, obviously they're going to do it with Lando. They're saying Lando gets his own movie, so maybe they'll. I liked Alden Ehrenreich. So we haven't seen a young Leia. I mean, we've seen the really young Leia, but we haven't seen like a 20s, 30s era Leia, age wise. We haven't. So I liked Alden Ehrenreich as Solo. I love Donald Glover as Lando. Yeah, bring those guys back. I'm in. But I don't know how Disney's going to handle that. You know what I mean? Like the only Star Wars property that has lost them money in the Disney era that I'm aware of was Solo. I don't think any other film that they've done has lost them money. If Solo even lost them money, by the way, I think it might have, but it was close, right? So we'll see how that shakes out. But fantastic conversation, guys. Thanks for hanging out and having this amazing conversation. Slimer, tell the folks where they can find you. Do you have a YouTube channel or something where people can connect with you?
No, but you'll find me on Orange Grove 55. I'm usually in the DMs stalking everybody and responding to OG's comments and hanging out with Citrus George. But that's usually where you'll find me.
Perfect. Yeah. Absolute pleasure having you on the show. Come back again. Hang out with us again. Yeah, fantastic stuff. George, tell the folks where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can find me on X at Disney George, the podcast A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on OG55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
I finally got the hand movements down.
Yeah, you got him.
Yeah.
You're good.
Go check out George and all of George's shows. In fact, go check out the Citrus Corner that OG and George just released. Was it today? Earlier today, right?
Today, this morning.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Break down the Mickey Views Braden's video and talk about that a little bit more depth. Good stuff, guys. OG, where can people find you? Grand Admiral OG, where can people find you, buddy?
Yeah, you can find me here on Orange Grove 55 on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter, Orange Grove 55. You can also find me on Instagram, Orange Grove 55. And I got a little special Star Wars drop for us today, and I've tested it, so it's not going to it won't get copyrighted. So.
Yeah.
Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
Always a pleasure, OG. Thanks for coming on the show. You can follow me on X at Jay Sherer over there. Check me out on X. You can also check out my How Stories Work with Jay Sherer channel. I got the Darth Vader video that OG referred to earlier.
Yes.
But I also have an original story coming out this year, and I did a table read version of it. It's a short film. Did a table read version of it. Part 1 of that table read will be on that channel this weekend. You can also find shorts. I cut up some of these episodes and put the shorts on that channel as well, so that people can find those shorts and then come to these longer videos. So definitely go check out How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. And other than that, you'll find me on the Story Geek Show here on Orange Grove 55's network. Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on episodes 7 and 8.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.